So nobody really knows what quality content means or really good content means.
This is Time for Marketing, the marketing podcast that will tell you everything you've missed when you didn't attend the marketing conference. For the third episode, I've invited Hannas Smith from the Verve Search. She's the head of creative there and has always excellent presentations on SEO at different marketing conferences. I'm not going to go into all of the details that we spoke about. If you want to find links on the things that we spoke about, go to timeformarketing.com. You will find all of the podcast notes there. And we are now more or less on every place where you can find podcasts. So go there and subscribe if you don't want to miss any further episodes. And now let's go to the call with Hannah. Hannah, welcome to the podcast. I'm very happy to talk to you. I've heard a couple of your presentations in the past, and you being an SEO, if I can say that, and myself being an SEO.
Yeah, you can say that. You can say that.
You're always answering the most important or the most pressing SEO question, and that is where to get links, and you do it in your own very special way. So thank you for you to be on the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
So we found you because you had a presentation on the SearchLeeds conference, and this is one of the many great presentations that you had. How was SearchLeeds? How did you like the conference?
It was amazing. It was really, really good. So it was the first time I've ever spoken at SearchLeeds, and I have to say, when I said yes, I thought it was quite a small conference. I thought, like maybe there'd be a couple of hundred people. And it would, be kind of small and relaxed. And there was actually, I think I'm right in saying they had nearly 2,000 attendees at SearchLeeds. So it's huge. It's a conference that's grown really quickly, really, really fast. And it's a free event. So like it was really fantastic. The audiences were so engaged and so friendly. It was a really great event.
Oh, wow. It's interesting. This is one of the SEO conferences that they were under my radar. But from what I've seen on this year, all of the different tracks and all of the great speakers, it seems that UK has a lot of free SEO conferences that have really excellent content. Myself, I've been at the Brighton SEO, and that was awesome, very awesome. Conference. So we'll have to, us Europeans, will have to travel to the UK more often, obviously.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. I would definitely encourage people to come. It's one of the things I'm really proud of actually here in the UK. We do have some great conferences which are paid for, but also we do like as a community run free events, which I think is excellent, not least because when I first started in this industry, I was working for quite a small agency and we didn't have budget to attend paid conferences. So I was very much, it was like, for me, it was definitely like, if it was a free conference, then I could go. If it was something we needed to buy a ticket for, it was going to be unlikely I could make it. So I'm definitely very passionate about supporting the free events here and abroad. So yeah, definitely do come along if you can.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure you're probably known by now for your presentation titles. The one that you had on the SearchLeeds was "What happens when a werewolf bites a goldfish?"
Yeah.
What is the funniest answer you have gotten to this question? Were there any funny answers?
So I didn't realize that most people don't know or aren't familiar with werewolf mythology. So the way it goes is that if a man is bitten by a werewolf, that man will become a werewolf. Similarly, if a woman is bitten by a werewolf, she will become a werewolf. So for me, like the answer to the question was like really kind of obvious. Like if a werewolf bites a goldfish, what you have is some sort of goldfish werewolf hybrid, which is, the stuff of nightmares or fantasies. I'm not sure which, but like really like a wonderful idea, I thought. But actually, when I mentioned this title to a bunch of people, they were like, oh, I don't know. Does the fish die? And I was like, oh, okay, then obviously it's just me that was big into werewolf fiction and mythology as a kid. I guess like the strangest answers have just been, so the fish dies, and people look at me in a way which suggests I should get out more. Which maybe I should, but I'm probably not going to.
But werewolves were sort of big also in Harry Potter, so I would presume that this would somehow rub off at least a bit, right?
Yeah, and also like Twilight had werewolves, right? I mean, not that I'm a massive proponent of Twilight. I think that was a terrible series which no young woman should read or watch. Ever. But I feel pretty sure there were some werewolves there, right?
Yeah. All right. So this is then the time for me to say, let's go into the your content of your presentation. This
Sure.
Your 5 minutes to tell us what's happened.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So since about 2009, I've been tasked with creating content. What sort of content? Well, I tend to refer to it as content that journalists want to write about and people want to share. And I do this, I create this content to gain links, coverage, and social shares. And I do this because links from authoritative sites, news outlets like the BBC, they increase the authority of our client sites, and over time, this translates into stronger organic rankings in search for our clients. For the most part, stronger organic rankings equal more money, and that's the end game, ultimately, to help our clients make more money online. So as you alluded to, I do speak at conferences fairly regularly, and there's one question which I'm fairly frequently asked. I am asked, where do you get your ideas? And actually, it's a question I always dread because I don't have a great answer, which is unfortunate. Nevertheless, it was exactly that question, where do you get your ideas, that I attempted to tackle in my latest talk at SearchLeeds. So first up, I should say that I suspect when people ask me where I get my ideas from, actually that's not the question they really want the answer to. I suspect that the question they really want to ask is, how do you get those links? And actually that question is doubly tough to answer because in truth, the answer lies partially in the idea and also what we do afterwards. So in my talk at SearchLeeds, I talked through a bunch of campaign examples in order to try and answer this question. I'm not going to try and do that here because I have just 5 minutes, a very strict time limit. But what I will talk about today are the 3 things which I believe will set you in really good stead if you too really want to get links from high authority sites like the BBC. So it looks like this. Number 1. Seek to gain a deep understanding of the media landscape. What do I mean by that? Well, in the past at conferences, I've definitely said something like, give journalists something that allows them to write the stories they want to tell. The problem is actually that that's a bland and frankly useless bit of advice if you don't understand the media landscape. Because if you don't understand the media landscape, then you don't know what stories those journalists want to tell. And ultimately, you will really, really need to know. So there are a bunch of tools that you can use to do this. I really like BuzzSumo. BuzzSumo is a paid-for tool, but you can get a free trial. And you can use the tool to search for particular topics to see the sorts of stories journalists are writing. Plus, you can also use it to search for topics within sites or within specific sections of sites. So, for example, if you had a car insurance client and your car insurance client really, really, really wanted coverage from motoring journalists, you could have a look at specific motoring sites or sections of websites which deal particularly with motoring and see the sorts of stories which are most covered. Do something like that. So like I said, I really like BuzzSumo, but actually you don't need fancy tools. You can get much the same data by doing advanced searches on Google. So even if you can't afford tools, you can still do stuff like this. So that's the number 1 piece of advice. gain a deep understanding of the media landscape. So number 2, pay attention. So an idea can come from anywhere. You may get ideas from other smart people, either in this industry or outside of it. Or you might find an interesting study or data source which might spark an idea. Or you might just stumble across something in your Twitter feed. Or on your walk to work, you might see something that sparks an idea. I think the key is to recognize these things as potential ideas. Neil Gaiman, writer and all-round excellent human being, and in fact, actually the inspiration for the talk I gave at SearchLeeds, he said this. He said, you get ideas from daydreaming. You get ideas from being bored. You get ideas all the time. The only difference between writers and other people is that we notice when we're doing it. There's another great quote I really like from another writer called Drew Gumerson, and he says, good ideas rarely seem like good ideas at their inception. That's what stops the majority of people from having them. So I really believe that you need to pay attention to things that might become ideas. So collect them, nurture them, validate them, really pay attention. So that's number 2. Finally, number 3, perhaps the most unpopular of the 3, I'm not going to lie, I would advise you to work your arse off. The truth is, if you want to get links from high authority sites, you are going to need to work really hard. So that means you work really hard on your idea. You work really hard on developing it. You also then work really hard to build or make whatever it is you need to best serve that idea for journalists. So work really hard then. And then finally, work really, really hard on your pitches to journalists. So one piece I did speak about at SearchLeeds is a great example of the power of hard work. For Party Casino, a client, we created a piece called What Makes a Hollywood Hit. And we'd been pitching the piece to journalists for 3 weeks, 3 whole weeks. And yet we hadn't managed to secure a single piece of coverage. Nothing. But we were not prepared to give up. James Barnes, the person who was working on the campaign, reworked his pitches over and over and over again. And thanks to his tenacity, today the campaign has links from over 120 sites, including The Telegraph, Forbes, NME, Grazia, and the Huffington Post, to name just a few. So really that's your 3. Gain a deep understanding of the media landscape, pay attention to things that might become ideas, and work your arse off. To wrap this thing up, I think there's a bunch of mythology surrounding creativity and indeed getting links from top tier sites. But all it really comes down to is how hard you are prepared to work. And for what it's worth, actually, this comforts me because it means that I don't need to be brilliant or well connected or even lucky. I just need to work really hard, and I can do that. And I think you can too.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. Really interesting things that you've mentioned in here. But one of the more interesting that stuck in my mind is on the second point when you say you have to pay attention. From when I was small, I sort of feel that the most important advice that I've read, I have no idea where because that was like 20 years ago, was to keep a notebook with you to write down all of these ideas. Do you have such a notebook? Do you use such a way?
Yeah, I have many notebooks. I'm actually a bit of a horror for notebooks. Like one of the things that I feel that I really ought to do is maybe embrace some technology and use Evernote or similar or something like that. But actually I don't. I am still very old fashioned in terms of writing ideas down and actually writing things by hand. But I think it puts you in a different headspace doing stuff like that. It also means that you don't miss out on things just because, your phone's dead or similar, or technology has failed you in some way. So yeah, no, I definitely still use notebooks a huge amount. I think something that kind of just sprung to mind for me when you mentioned that is something that my dad used to say. He used to say, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, like use them in that order. And by that, he means I should listen more than I speak. I don't think I've managed that yet, but like, I think it's a pretty good bit of advice.
Yeah, and also I will link to the Neil Gaiman article that you mentioned.
Yeah, please do.
And what I liked from him in that article, it was that he tells you that the ideas are born in the in when you are bored, and I sort of feel that this is just my personal experience. I'm not even sure if that is a question, but I worked best in the jobs where I was bored from time to time, meaning that I had time to think about stuff. And this is also how I feel that the best ideas come when you have time to think, right? This is something that probably people have to take if you're trying to be creative. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely I would. I think I feel that most of the time creativity doesn't happen under pressure, or it doesn't happen well under pressure. I think that the worst thing you can do to any human is sort of sit them down and say, you have an hour, come up with a load of ideas for me. Because I think the second you do that, like some sort of panic mode sets in, a huge amount of fear, self-loathing, everything kind of piles in on top of a person, and at that point they are unable to kind of come up with anything. And I think perhaps that's what Neil's talking about when he's talking about being bored. What does bored mean? It means that you've got some time on your hands and you're letting your mind wander. And there's a ton of really interesting kind of hypotheses around creativity, but one that particularly rings true for me is the idea that creativity is it's about the coming together of things. So it's maybe like a thing that your friend said to you last night, plus an article you just read, and a piece of graffiti that you walked past this morning. And it's sort of all of those things coming together. It's this idea of creativity being confluence, this idea of things coming together to produce something new. And I think that happens more readily when your mind is able to wander.
Yeah. Okay, for the last question, let's go a bit back to the acquiring links. I sort of feel that in the last 10 years, the mantra for links was build or make quality content. Has it changed into make incredibly good content and present it in a very specific way, and then you'll get organic links?
I think I think the problem with either of those definitions is that they are by their nature subjective. So nobody really knows what quality content means or really good content means. And how could you? I also think that I don't believe that anybody sets out to make things which are terrible. It just happens by accident. It certainly happened to me. So I think I think certainly stuff has changed over time. I think one of the biggest challenges now is that news is viral. So it took an awful long time, I think, for news outlets to really understand the nature of human behavior online, and therefore, for a while at least, people like me and other SEOs who were kind of messing around doing the same sorts of things as me, and there's always been a bunch of us. We kind of got away with stuff pretty easily. Like, we didn't actually have that much competition. The sorts of things we were making certainly weren't being made by other news outlets. They weren't being made by very many other companies. And so as a consequence, I think because we understood human behavior online, we had almost without knowing it, we had a really good understanding of the sorts of things that were likely to work and that humans were likely to respond to. And I think now, like I say, the news is viral. Like every other second, Trump is doing something heinous or ridiculous or terrifying. Brexit's kind of a big deal here. Do you know what I mean? Like the competing with that news and that appetite, the sorts of things that we do, I feel like it's tougher to stand out against that. I also think that like success doesn't look quite the same as it used to. So I remember kind of if you made an objectively good, in inverted commas, piece of content, you could expect, like a really good bit of content would get over 1,000 linking root domains, which is a fairly poor yardstick of measuring good, but whatever. Let's not worry about that bit. But you did something good, you could get 1,000 linking root domains. Now, I think I'm just trying to think back, like the most successful piece of content we've done in the last 2 years or so got about 500 linking root domains. And for what it's worth, I think it was just as good as the pieces in the past that would have got 1,200. And I think that speaks at least a little to the competition that's out there. And actually, I don't think it's competition from brands so much, or like other companies creating things in the space, or other agencies creating things in the space. I really do believe that it's like having spoken to mates in the industry as well, they're seeing something similar. They're seeing that like a really, really fantastic piece will get about 500 linking root domains as opposed to 1,500 or 2,000 like it would before. So I do think stuff like that's changed. And like it's an evolving ecosystem. It always will be. The things that used to capture people's imagination won't necessarily or don't continue to now, and maybe won't in the future. So I think it's constantly a challenge to keep evolving, but that's kind of fun. Right?
Yeah, that makes our jobs fun, because we have to learn how to do stuff better and different every year.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So this was your brief on your presentation on SearchLeeds. Let's wrap it up here. We're a bit longer than normally, but that's okay. So on the great content that we have, we can always do that. Hannah, thank you very much for being here. You have any plans for any future conference already set up?
Not right now. I am teaching a training course at Brighton SEO in September. And I think with a bit of luck and a fair wind, I may fix up a couple more speaking gigs before the end of the year. So yeah, watch this space, I guess. Cool.
All right. So thank you very much. And cool. We'll finish the recording here. We should probably say goodbye.
I will. Thanks so much for having me.
This was Hannah Smith from the Verve Search company. And this is the end of the third episode of the Time for Marketing podcasts. Again, subscribe, go comment, and rate the podcast, and I hope to see you listening to the next episode.